Moments when I knew I did not belong. My friend was showing me her new engagement ring. I looked at her with astonishment and disbelief. Others in our friend group were gathering around, oohing and awing over the ring. I said, "How can you know you want to marry this guy? We're only in 8th grade. I had that unsettling feeling that I did not truly belong with my peers in that gaggle of boy-crazy 14-year-olds. Attending Young Life Group in high school, reading the hip paperback version of the New Testament called Good News, asking question after question about Jesus and why the scripture said what it did. Finally, the adult leader told me, "Dina, that's the way it is, because that's the way it is." I didn't go back. Running into one of my college roommates after I had moved off campus. "Come on in, Dina, we're about to snort some coke." No thanks, not for me. I guess I don't really belong with you anymore. A few years later, coming out to discover that I was too feminine for the dykes and too dykey for the straight women. Where did I belong? Weekly worship at the liberal Christian seminary where I earned my MDiv in preparation for ministry. Opening the hymnal one week to sing a familiar hymn from my Unitarian childhood, then startled to find that someone had changed all the words. What am I singing? Some of this feels like home, and some of this feels foreign. It took me a while to realize that they had the words first, and the Unitarians changed the lyrics later. Attending my first ecumenical clergy meeting in the rural town where I served my first parish to find that all the ministers except me were older, white men with white beards, I honestly could not tell them apart. Where do I fit? Who are my people? How do I know I belong? When we are searching for a place to put down roots, when we are seeking community to counteract our existential loneliness, we come with questions about belonging. Do my values align here? Can I be myself here? Will I be able to connect with others? Will this be home? Will they hold me when I falter? Will this community challenge me in a good way and help me grow? Will they harbor me when I'm in danger? We may come with questions like, will I be the only person of color in a sea of white people? Will I be the only trans person in a room full of cisgender people? Will I be the only queer person in a room of straight folks? Will I be the only person in my 20s or 30s in a church full of people over the age of 60? Will I be the only immigrant in a room full of citizens? Finding belonging is a central hope when we explore any new community, even if we can't articulate that. And belonging takes time. Allowing ourselves to know and to be known deeply takes time and intentional vulnerability. Belonging is a process that changes as we change and as our community changes. Simone Weil wrote, "To be rooted is perhaps the most important and least recognized need of the human soul." A human being has roots by virtue of their real, active, and natural participation in the life of a community, which preserves in living shape certain particular treasures of the past, and certain particular expectations of the future. The future. We can't do things like we've always done them and expect to grow and thrive as a community. We have to be open to new ideas and new ways and new songs and new people. One of our congregation's ends or goal statement states that we create accessible, courageous, and innovative welcome to people who might feel that they're looking for a sense of belonging and a spiritual home with us. Now, we could spend hours unpacking those three important words: courageous, accessible, and innovative. I think a phrase that might encompass them all is radical welcome. What is radical welcome? Episcopal Chaplain Stephanie Spellers defines radical welcome as a fundamental spiritual practice that combines welcome and hospitality with a clear awareness of power and patterns of inclusion and exclusion. She writes, "Welcome says, come in, sit down, stay a while. We are honored to have you." It also says, the door is open, a bit like, you're welcome to whatever's in the fridge. It indicates that openness of spirit. She offers a teaching from Croatian theologian Miroslav Volf, who explores welcome more deeply in his book, Exclusion and Embrace. Volf describes 4 movements that comprise mutual embrace. Let's listen to his ideas on both the physical and metaphorical levels about mutual embrace. And I get the irony that it's me telling you about embrace since I do not hug people. So we're just going to pretend that I don't have fragrance sensitivities as I relate this teaching. His teaching is Act 1. We open the arms. Opening the arms telegraphs the desire to reach beyond yourself, to connect with another, to be part of them and them to be part of you. The act of opening your arms creates space for the other to come in. And then Act 2 is waiting. Waiting. Because you cannot force another to come inside. You cannot coerce. You must wait at that boundary of hope that the power of your vulnerability will prove compelling. Act 3 is closing, the mutual indwelling of the embrace, holding each other and finding yourself received in kind. In an embrace, the identity of the self is both preserved and transformed as you receive the other on their terms, in that kind of open-armed hug. And Act 4 is opening the arms again. Because the two have not melded into one, you may once again open your arms. And you can look at yourself and see how you have been enriched, and look again at the other who continues to be both friend and mystery. So where and when can we even consider engaging in such a radical embrace? We are living in a time of great fear and mistrust for good reasons. We are witnessing the storming of the Capitol from the inside this time. People at the highest level of power in our country are doing so many unconstitutional and illegal things, it's hard to keep track of them all. The wealthiest man in the world who is not elected is making decisions about who gets health care, who gets food, who gets housing, who gets their Social Security check, and who does not. There are deportations and threats of deportations. The international aid to prevent babies from dying and to stop communicable diseases has been suspended. You know all these things. We are hearing hatred spewed daily against Black people, Indigenous people, people of color, immigrants, trans and non-binary people, whom we are and whom we cherish. We are living in a time of intensified criminalization of people simply for being who they are. It is a spiritual battle to keep up with the news in this new year and not shut down, not sink into despair. Because as Reverend Jennifer says, sometimes it's about the news and sometimes it's about family. Excuse me, I think I'm allergic to preaching. Or maybe it's the dust mites from 1892. All right, so I want to ask you, because I think we're all struggling with this, how and when are you taking in the news these days, and what do you do to prepare yourself to hear it and feel it? And then what do you do after it sinks in? I am not someone prone to anxiety, but I will tell you that I've found myself sitting on the couch in the evenings these last few weeks, reading my New York Times app in literal fear and trembling. Then I go to bed. And then I struggle to rise in the morning with hope in my heart. And I know better. This is not an effective way to live during a time of national trauma. I learned that in 2020, I think it was. I cannot touch the news app before bed and then rise a resourced person ready to raise my voice or comfort others. I need a new strategy. One of Reverend Jennifer's friends recently told her, "Don't scroll the news unless you are ready to pray the news." Don't scroll the news unless you are ready to pray the news. So my new strategy is to take 5 deep breaths before reading or hearing the bad news. 5 counts in, 5 counts out, 5 times in a row. Then 5 prayers after the news, prayers for those who are suffering the most. Then 5 phone calls to my senators and representatives on, take your pick, the most urgent issue of the day. Okay, only 3, but I'm working up to 5. And then I come here to our beloved and cherished community to be shoulder to shoulder with you, where together we feel the fear, but we don't cower from the bullies. And we don't feed the anxiety. We feed the love. We remind each other in 3-dimensional, real, authentic living what and whom we trust, and we create hope through action. Because you know, this goes way beyond party politics. This is about defending democracy. This is about defending family. This is about living our core ideals with each other and manifesting them in the world. Spellers defines the radical part of radical welcome as a deep, fierce, urgent commitment to some core ideal. Radical is getting down to the roots, the embrace of the marginalized, silenced, oppressed stranger, with the understanding that your life depends on this saving stranger coming to you and stretching your tight little heart. So who are the saving strangers among us and beyond us to whom we can open our arms and allow our hearts to be stretched? Speller's book introduces us to 8 radically welcoming congregations, and here is one of them. Grace Episcopal Church in Lawrence, Massachusetts, was faced with the most painful of dilemmas: change or die. The historically white middle-class city of Lawrence had shifted, and the children of the aging white church community had moved on. Members of the dying church opted to live, and that meant embracing their now Latinx neighborhood. From the beginning, there were concerns that Grace would become a Latinx church, that the new members would actually steal the church from their white elders. Oof. The Latino priest took that fear very seriously, however. He said, we have to convince people that no one was trying to take over their church and run away with it. Transformation came when white and Latinx members worked together to create and run several homegrown community ministries, and when they intentionally crafted opportunities to communicate openly and truly enjoy and respect each other's cultures. Eventually, the dominant Anglo community began to welcome the leadership of the younger, less formally educated, and less affluent members. Moving beyond mere representation, the thriving congregation now looks more like their neighborhood, more Latinx than white. The next transformation for them will be to continue to grow while nurturing those points of common ground between the community and the neighborhood. I remember one of our elders, Jan Gottschalk of blessed memory, telling me about when she and her husband Charles became members here at First Church in the early 1950s. They got involved in the thriving young adults group here, at that time called the Channing Group. But when the young adults started serving on the board of trustees, moving into leadership roles in our church, the older adults got angry with them, accusing them of taking over. Can you imagine that? Now we're like, please come ahead, you in your 20s and 30s and 40s, please take over our church. Or do we? How do power and patterns of exclusion and inclusion take form in our community? What are our assumptions about who belongs? And how can we keep opening our embrace? Who is the stranger? And how do we keep our hearts open to being saved by each other in these perilous times when we are tempted to slam shut the door? What are the paths to belonging in our community, and how do we accompany one another along those paths of deepening connection so that we can root ourselves deeply and fiercely in our core ideals of pluralism, equity, justice, and interdependence, so that we can resource each other and rise each day with hope and resolve, so we can harbor the stranger with love at our center. And I'm not saying don't feel the fear. It's human to feel the fear. It's reasonable to cower now and then, especially if you are one of our beloveds who has a targeted identity. Just don't cower alone. Let someone you trust come alongside you. You may be surprised at how they can relight that fire of hope and commitment in your heart. Jan Richardson wrote in her poem a blessing called Sanctuary. You hardly knew how hungry you were to be gathered in, to receive the welcome that invited you to enter entirely. Nothing of you found foreign or strange. Nothing of your life that you were asked to leave behind or to carry in silence or shame. Tentative steps became settling in, leaning into the blessing that enfolded you, taking your place in the circle that stunned you with its unimagined grace. You began to breathe again, to move without fear, to speak with abandon the words that you carried in your bones, that echoed in your being. You learned to sing. First Church, we can be that sanctuary of unimagined grace. We can be those who accompany the stranger and each other. We can stretch our frightened hearts together. So may we commit ourselves to making it so.